Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of our Epic X-Men reread presented by Crushing Comics. I am here with Tyler, who has read this material before many times over, as I have as well, but also with Fariha, who this is her first time reading this classic Claremont material that we began from Giant Size X-Men and Uncanny X-Men 94. And we're almost to the end of our first season, quote unquote. This is our penultimate episode. We are here reading Uncanny X-Men 135 and 136. We're dead in the heart of the Phoenix Saga right now. And we're also going to read the backups from Classic X-Men 37 and 38, which are both Dazzler stories, and they're somewhat contemporaneous to this story. Just to give us a little warm-up before we dive in, this story, we ended Uncanny X-Men 34 on a very surprising moment with Dark Phoenix, right? She just busts out. She's in this red and gold costume. We knew that something was going on, but it was very shocking to encounter. So I wanted to ask you, what is another story or book, without spoiling the surprise, that handed you a really big surprise? That is something that you go like, oh, that was a great twist. Don't spoil the twist. Just recommend the thing. Tyler, do you have one?
Yeah. Babylon 5.
Babylon 5 has several really good twists.
Yeah. But I think the one that I was thinking of is like the one in the middle of there are many, but I think there was the one where it was a change from it's a change in dynamics between two of the main characters. Like that particular event switched the dynamics completely. So I was like, whoa, I did not see that coming. So yeah.
Freya, what about you? What is something that has delivered you a major surprise without spoiling the surprise itself?
So maybe because I read so many stories, it's very difficult to surprise me anymore. Yeah. But the one that I remember, and that was because it was one of my earlier reads, is the Dark Knight Returns, the very end. There is there's one character that shows up and you see that character, Batman goes and talks to that character, and then you're like, oh, okay, that's just weird. What is that about? And then that character shows up at the end, and it was like, oh, bam. I thought that was very well executed, and then the whole idea of Bruce Wayne being like very methodical and then have a plan. So that really got to me, but that was because I was also earlier read. Nowadays, nothing gets me. Nothing surprises me anymore. I'm like, sure. It's sad though. It's sad though. But I wish it happened.
No, it happens. I mean, it's the same with me when I'm watching television shows now, especially the non, the CBS, the NBC, ABC shows. It's like, yeah, I saw it coming like a mile away. Oh yeah, this is the twist. Oh yeah, this is it. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, after you've seen a lot, it becomes that way. Yeah. But what about Peter? What is your
twist? It's interesting that you said the thing you just said, Tyler, because something I was reading recently is an examination of this whole kind of mystery box culture that very much came into play after Lost from J.J. Abrams and all those folks, where, and a lot of TV shows are like this, where they say, like, if the people started to guess it, we had to change it. They'll be like, oh, we were on message boards and people started to hint at our plots. We had to take a left turn. And that's created, I think, a lot of TV and movies and stories that are surprising, but they're not surprising in like a fun way. Because the best kind of surprise is a surprise that seems totally shocking, and then you realize you had the threads for it. I think that's the best kind of narrative surprise. Yeah. And so these shows that like insist on twisting so hard to avoid the thing that anybody theorized, I think they've ruined what surprise is. And the one I was going to say was going to be Battlestar Galactica, one of my favorite shows of all time. I recently rewatched a lot of it. And a lot of it still hits me really hard from a surprise aspect. But then towards the end, they try to do a big surprise where they kind of do one of those pivots out of it because people had started to guess one thing. And the creator was very stubbornly like, no, it can't be something that people people already figured out. And it kind of like messes with the momentum of the show because they try to steer out of it so hard. So then I was thinking, like, what's a genuinely good surprise where like it was rewarding in the same way this Dark Phoenix moment was rewarding in 134. And for me, it's The Good Place. The Good Place, especially the first big surprise, but The Good Place has many surprises in it.
Right.
It's right there for you. It was right within your grasp, and it's utterly shocking. Don't let anybody spoil it for you. And
I never knew it.
Right, but that's the best kind.
Yeah.
I kind of knew it
true.
is the best kind.
Yeah.
And so to me, probably thinking of the past like decade of my media consumption, I think Good Place was the best cool surprise that I've consumed.
So the other one, I would say that like recently so when I read it, it didn't surprise me because I'm like, okay, sure. But having now went back and reread other one, House of X 2.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean,
that's just because of rereading other things. You're like, oh.
Well, this is a good juncture to mention our spoiler policy. So we, especially because of one of the scenes in these issues, we will talk about things up through and including House of X and Powers of X, because part of what spurred us onto this reread is a critical evaluation of all of this past X-Men with those stories. Here's what's so interesting to me about that. At the time, I was so angry about House of X 2 because I was like, it's too big of a change. I don't like retcons of this size. You're just doing it because you're out of other ideas, whatever. Now that I'm reading all of this, I do see that the surprise was there all along. Hickman made it such that it felt like the surprise was there all along. I wish I could go back to that Peter that was in like, July of 2019, hating it. Go, look, you're always going to hate this kind of story. It's just who you are. But it's much more seated in the story than you did. And I think maybe that was my fault. I refer to myself as this big X-Men fan, but there are tons of people who know X-Men better than me. And maybe some of them immediately had a click with all of those Morris scenes that had happened over the years. And it worked for them better, even at the time. I can admit when I'm wrong. I'm not saying Hickman's a good writer. Don't get me wrong, folks.
Yes,
I'm just saying I came off a little bit harsh about Hoxpox too.
No, I mean, if you just read X-Men Legacy by Mike Carey, it will change your life.
Yes, I'm so happy you finally are on this team with Tyler and I.
It will change your life about Moira, like about read House of X 2, then go and read Mike Carey's X-Men. Your mind will be blown. Yeah. Then read Murders 17. Whichever one they have the hospital, just read that. If you read them in order, then you'll be like,
yeah. All right, folks. So, before we split, we're dancing too close to spoilers right now. So we're going to move on with our conversation.
Let's start with something funny because Phoenix blew up the Blackbird, right? And the first thing that Kurt said was like, oh no, we destroyed yet another plane. I was like, dude, that is not what you should be focusing on. This is not the important thing.
Sometimes, when you're in trouble, you focus on the one that you don't necessarily think about.
I know.
But yeah, so the thing is like, it's, is it weird that I don't remember, even though I read both of these issues this morning, I don't remember anything. So you guys have to guide me. And then I'll be like, oh yeah, that happened.
Well, we open up this issue with Dark Phoenix's power just exploding from her. Something's happened to kind of trip her last psychic breaker, and the ultimate power of the Phoenix is corrupting her ultimately. And right off the bat, I'm sorry we've got to start with something heavy here, but right off the bat, Claremont goes right to the well of his classic trope of associating power as sexual gratification, but only for women. Find me a place where he's written this for a male character. I'll wait. Aurora even describes Jean as having lust as this, for power. So it's kind of like, you can see Claremont connecting the dots to all of these kind of like sexual subplots he's given Jean. And that's a turnoff for me personally. I'm over this trope. But we also get to see that Jean has complete molecular control of the world around her. She turns a tree to gold. Okay. Yes. She's solving the world financial crisis one tree at a time. And
which was actually the second thing that That's Nightcrawler says. Like, oh my god, it will solve New York's financial crisis.
It does kind of feel like Claremont has just given up on writing Nightcrawler for the past 5 issues. Like, he has nothing to contribute.
I know. Again, no, wrong thing. Okay, sorry.
No, but the thing is, like, no, I was just saying that, you know, with the whole sexual thing about like too much power and ladies and all of that. So I don't know where I read this, or someone said it. Is Phoenix supposed to be allegory for womanhood? What?
Yes, per Claremont. I mean, yes.
No. Womanhood, I've went from a girl to a woman. I never killed 5 billion people as I did it. It's not a thing that happens.
No, you didn't have an insatiable hunger for broccoli and asparagus that led you to destroy a planet?
I didn't have either. And neither, like, it's not a thing. So I'm glad that they kind of moved away from that. Like, Phoenix is now a no common thing. Yeah. Don't worry about it.
So now you finally get the broccoli people or the asparagus people. People go back and forth. Even within the comic now, they do refer. I've seen it in the comics of them referring to that time that Jean killed the planet of the broccoli people, the asparagus people. Yeah. Now you are finally in on the joke.
Yeah, now I get it.
But she wasn't trying to. So here's the first. I know Tyler hasn't even had a chance to talk yet. Here's the first big topic. We'll start with Tyler. I think the key to Claremont's concept of Phoenix is that she is generally amoral in a way, because an amoral doesn't mean against morals. It just means oblivious to morals. Yeah. She's not operating on a human scale. You know, at the beginning of issue 136, Landra compares her to Galactus. The only reason Phoenix is dark is because she needs fuel, and Jean doesn't have control over that need for fuel. And Phoenix sees the fuel of a star with an inhabited planet surrounding it, orbiting it, as the same as the fuel of an uninhabited star, because to her, life on that level is something that she can just create or destroy at will. So it doesn't really matter if she kills 5 billion people or not. She can put them back if she feels like it. And so it's kind of interesting that Claremont, even though she's the Dark Phoenix, and even though there's the Dark Phoenix saga, and even though she's being presented in a villainous fashion here, she's not malicious. And no part of these two issues, because after this in 137, kind of the dark part of Phoenix is over in 137. This is it. This is Dark Phoenix, 135 and 136. Find me one time that she's malicious. She's kind of angry at her teammates, but she's really just wants more power. She wants the Macron crystal. She wants to generate energy. Tyler, what do you think about that? Is that true? Is that how you read it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, she basically transcends good and evil here. So she's like, you know, I mean, she's a cosmic being. She doesn't, I mean, to her, that concept of like, of good and evil, she wasn't even aware that the system in which she consumed the star was inhabited, because
she didn't even check.
It's beneath her. Like, yeah, she's like, oh, I need power. So, you know, flew into the sun, get her power, and she's like, oh yeah, this is glorious. And she basically ignored the star core the first time, and then she also ignored the Shi'ar battle cruiser until the Shi'ar fired on her. Right. And then she's like, no, this is not gonna happen. You know, so basically I think I completely agree with you that there's no malice in this in presenting her this way. It's just that, you know, she's just being Phoenix. Is just being Phoenix. That's all.
What did you think about that, Fariha?
So the thing is, like, I feel like I would understand it more, and that if this is the same problem we had with Secret Empire, like, you know, with the Stevil, who was taking over Captain America, and then he was like being evil all over the place, right? And you're like, okay, so is there someone else in there? Like, you know, if you don't hear from the character within, like, you know, is there Jean actually in there? And she's kind of worried that, hey, these people are being killed. Like, oh my God, let's not do this. I can't control it. If you don't hear that background, or like, you know, where she is coming from and stuff like that, it just feels like another being that was like exactly what you guys said, that she's above all of this and she's killing all of this and stuff. So then you're like, okay, then how do you even hold that accountable? How do you hold anyone accountable? So now everyone end up looking like idiots, like, so I that's one of the reasons I'm kind of like I don't like these kind of storytelling where it's like, like a whole bunch of people just kind of died because of a thing. And now you're like, oh, we have to do something with this character now. What are you going to, it's the same thing we talked about, Wanda one time. It's like, okay, what are you going to tell her? Like, she was under duress. Like, how are you going to punish her? So same thing. Same thing kind of goes over here. It's like, okay, she was not in control. It was some other being. What are you going to do?
Well, not to jump too far ahead, because we're going to save this discussion for next episode with 137, but that is absolutely the conversation that winds up happening in the Marvel editorial office. Claremont is under the impression that he can get away with just being like, whatever, she was hungry. She ate a planet of people by mistake by making a sun go supernova. And Shooter, right? Tyler, it's Jim Shooter as the editor is like, no, actually, you can't commit genocide and have no plot consequences. And that creates the struggle in 137, but we're going to save that. So there's, Fariha, do you have something else you want to add?
No, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, if you just don't do that kind of thing, how people were talking about, like, oh my god, like, X-Men has villains in their council. I'm like, no, she is no longer in the council. Like, the worst villain in X-Men is no longer in the council. But that's what it ends up doing. It's like, okay, so I don't know how to deal with, like, it's too much complexity that you're introducing in a simple superhero story.
I refer to this a lot as just scale problem. Like, a lot of times in my notes, because I take notes in everything I read, I will just have a note that says scale problem, because to me, it's like whenever any author tries to escalate their story by introducing something that just doesn't make sense. It's like they have an immortal character and they're like, and they have that character be like, yes, I was the one who made George Washington run for president. And it's like, if you're not going to spend the time to explore that in your plot and you're just trying to use that as a throwaway detail to make your vampire seem old, that's going to create problems of scale for your whole story, because now we have to always be thinking about that every time we see your character, of like, oh, this character really cares about democracy or whatever. And it's not going to track. And I think that as much as this page of the star going supernova and the planet getting destroyed is iconic, and as much as it absolutely has an effect on what happens at the end of this Phoenix story, I do think it's a little bit of a scale problem, because anytime anybody tries to bring some Phoenix stuff in the future, we have to approach that from the perspective of, this is the Phoenix Force who just killed a planet of 5 to 7 million people without a blink. And like billion. And you can't do a Phoenix story, and in some ways you can't do a Jean story without that knowledge, because Jean has subsequently absorbed the memories of the Phoenix. And so Jean does remember, theoretically, the point in time when she committed genocide against 7 billion people. She has that memory.
Yeah, now I understand why Teen Jean was so upset. Like, girl was so upset about so many things. And and the thing is, like, okay, even if you're going to kill all the 7 billion people, don't say that they're sentient and peace-loving. Just give us something.
Yeah, just make them hedgehogs or something. Like, don't tell us about how beautiful their culture is.
They're peace-loving people. I'm like, oh no, come on.
In the next issue, during the Shi'ar meeting, they actually hinted that the system itself have more than one inhabited planets.
Oh,
because it's
even
inhabited
worse.
Planets with the S. So I mean, this is the first time I noticed that, actually. So I was like, oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not just 5 billion.
I made a similar mistake in my D&D campaign recently that I DM, where I had them have a vision of a world that was ending, and it was too sad, and they weren't supposed to be able to stop it. They were supposed to just like learn this piece of information, and they get obsessed with saving all the people. I'm like, let the people die. You're just here to learn this. The world was going to end anyway. They're like, no, we can't let a world end. That's not who we are. I'm like, gosh darn it. I'm just as bad. I walked right into this.
We need to introduce them to Hickman and Namor. You would tell him, like, hey man, listen.
Hey man, it's okay. I'm just here to blow up this planet. Just let me.
Give me the remote. Let's end this.
So there's a few smaller plot points here that are actually pretty interesting. Let me just tick through them and see what you all think. So one is Shaw uses what appears to be a very public attack by the X-Men. Like, nobody else in the Hellfire Club has the context of all the evil stuff that's going on, to basically just further manipulate Senator Kelly towards Sentinels. I mean, he doesn't say it out loud on the panel, but he wants to move them towards Sentinels, continuing this plot of this person who's part of the minority, who's grown to be in power, and he actually is trying to do everything he can to impede the progress, the life, the freedom of everybody else who shares the same status as him.
Well, there was also a little bit of a retcon later on that he was involved in Project Armageddon, right? So just to insert him back into the Sentinel program of like Lang. So in a way, I think that's but it started here, and I was kind of surprised too, because I was like, well, wait, what makes you think you're safe from Sentinel?
Right. Yeah, that's a genie you don't want to let out of the bottle, Shauna.
Yeah. So and that's one of the reasons I was like super confused. I'm like, are you dumb? Like, what's? I didn't get that bit though. It's like, okay, because not a spoiler, but we later seen Shaw is like, okay, I am the one who can, mess with mutants. You can't mess with mutants, So he is now in that, like, he has accepted that persona. But the thing is, like, it's like, okay, so now you're talking with Sentinel. It's like, how are you, Mofo? You're a mutant. Son, you're a mutant.
I think the thing is that
he just wanted chaos. That's what it is. He just wanted chaos.
Maybe it's that, and maybe I think he still thinks that he can control them.
So is this Senator Kelly is the same one as like the one with the Nightcrawler behind it? Do you want to be with them? Is that the same guy?
No, that's a pastor. That's not Senator.
Oh, that's that guy.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. But Senator Kelly has a big role to play.
Yes. Okay.
Certain things.
Yeah, he's the one. Oh, he was in X2 movie. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is like, but I don't know. When I saw that, I'm like, that seemed dumb. Like, it's one thing. It's like, oh, we need to take down the X-Men because X-Men is in the way for me to kind of take over the mutant and then make them feel like they need me and then do something that way. But it's like, oh, we need to bring it on. Boy, you dumb. Go away.
Yeah, I don't really understand what he thinks he's going to gain from that.
Unless maybe, I don't know. Maybe Sentinel was supposed to go after humans at the end of the day. I don't know. Seems weird. Seems awkward. And the thing is, it's not that, oh, we didn't even know that he was a mutant. He already came out as a mutant. So it's like, what's your story?
Yeah, I have no idea what his plan was going with that.
Well, here's the second of the three smaller details. So many big names in heroing notice the Phoenix. The Fantastic Four notice the Phoenix. Spider-Man notices the Phoenix. Doctor Strange notices the Phoenix. I would have loved if he would get involved. You know who doesn't notice the Phoenix? The good-for-nothing Avengers. Partially because Beast is in their control room, and Beast, once an X-Men, always an X-Men, is like, I'm not going to let the Avengers handle this. I'm going to go look into it myself. But really, like Thor, Iron Man, you didn't have a little heads-up display in your little Iron Man mask that let you know that the Phoenix had arrived. This just makes me laugh harder about like AVX and all the subsequent stuff, because if AVX had been like FF versus FX, I would have been like, well, yeah, Reed really did care about the Phoenix the first time around. But I just think it's so funny that the Avengers' whole potential participation in this event is contingent on Beast like noticing it on the screen and calling them all, and otherwise they're completely oblivious. I just get a laugh out of that every time.
But to be honest, that also makes sense why it's actually AVX, because this time they were ready. Next time, there was actually a line in there that's because I recently read it, and there was actually like yeah, we kind of we messed up the last time, so we know it this time. There was actually a line similar to that, but I also thought that it was because Beast was kind of stopping them from knowing.
Well, yeah.
He wanted to, like,
but my argument is like Tony Stark doesn't know. Really, he was waiting for Beast to call him.
Wait! But Beast basically ran off on the police call, not on Phoenix, right?
That's right. He ran off because he saw the police scanner call about the Hellfire Club. It's suggested in the next issue when Jimmy Carter calls the Avengers Mansion that maybe Beast would have also seen the note about the Phoenix had he still been in the control center.
He been
but
there?
That's not why he originally leaves.
But basically Beast is bye y'all. I'm going back to my family. It's like,
but that's what I was. Yeah, that's what I was saying though. It's like because they actually have one person doing monitoring, and that person just out and left. So
Yeah.
that's why they didn't know. But then in the AVX, they're like, yeah, we kind of have extra stuff. So that everyone kind of aware of these things now. So
But
they kind of got like smart about it.
but this
But
kind
also
of
Captain America, what he's gonna do with Phoenix?
but this
He'll be
kind of
like-
scene, right? This kind of scene is more like is Claremont shorthand for X-Men doing something really big. Because the moment you see a lot of like all the Marvel Universe characters reacting only on one page and only in one panel, it is a big thing.
Oh yeah. Oh, if you think about it, Second Coming has it. Then like a lot of the other. Oh yeah, you're right.
So you have like
you're
everyone reacting, and then it's like, okay, a big thing.
right. Like, yeah, man, do you want to go and say like? Be with
Yeah,
the
even
people?
even at the end of like Astonishing X-Men, it happens too, right? The very first run of Astonishing X-Men, yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's a classic trope of kind of like flash around all their
Yeah.
shocked faces.
Yeah.
So here's
but by the way, we forgot to talk about it in the last episode. Beast was reading this book, some random science book, and he's like, "Can't wait to see it in the movies." I thought that was very. Like, can't wait, but it was a science book. It was funny. Sorry.
So speaking of scientists, the third minor revelation here is another cutaway scene to Maura McTaggart. Here comes our big spoilers for the modern day. And Maura says she already dwarfs any mutant we've already charted. Thoughts about how this has new significance given our modern age?
Yeah, I think it goes back to like that they were thinking about using Phoenix as a resurrection. That but then I also like they were in the background charting a bunch of mutants and stuff like that, and yeah. But the thing is, I was laughing at like Banshee bringing the tea and everything.
Yeah, she's like, how do I make this guy useful? How do you make a good cup of tea, good mug of tea?
He's always bringing stuff to her.
Yeah.
Like, that's how you know he's still around. Like, he's always bringing tea. So that was funny. And he's also wearing his Irish green because he's Irish. You gotta know that.
Tyler, any thoughts on this Maura panel on how we can
not much.
reinterpret
It's
it?
just I just thought that like maybe Moira and Xavier both basically lit up. It's like, oh, it's cosmic now. Because I mean Moira has some presumably has some cosmic plans, right? So this is like, okay, checkbox, cosmic. We have to, this is something that we need to take care of.
The thing that it really made me think of, and you don't even need Hoxpox for this, honestly, is like we just got through all the Proteus stuff, and we know from Claremont's own run that Maura kind of already has Legion in her pocket. And then we know via Hoxpox that like that was very deliberate, and she deliberately knew that Legion was one of these two reality warpers they created, hedging their bets for eventual resurrection process. And she in this moment is like, she already dwarfs any mutant we've already charted. Like, it really struck me because, again, per House of X2, we know she has an idea of what the Phoenix is because she's encountered it in at least one life before. But it really makes me wonder if she's ever encountered Jean as the Phoenix, as the Dark Phoenix, and kind of like the wonder and dread that's in her eyes at this moment. Like, it's exactly the thing that they need to kickstart the mutant race. It's happening maybe way sooner than she ever anticipated. And even this thing that she did specifically in Life 10 that they've never done before, which is make Proteus and Legion, she already dwarfs those mutants that they've already charted. It almost makes me wonder in what way Phoenix might eventually bring the Avengers to blows with the X-Men and again in the Hickman run, but we're not going to go there. So any other thoughts on Maura before we move on? Okay, so that pretty much is it for this episode. Or this issue anyway. We're not quite done the episode. I can understand why Fariha kind of doesn't remember it because it's weirdly shaped. It's kind of like there's this initial 5-page fight with the X-Men. There's the 2 pages of Shaw talking to Kelly, and then Jean takes off into space. And aside from a few intercuts, the whole rest of the issue is kind of just Jean zooming around in space while the X-Men are back at Earth. Which brings us to the next issue, which starts with this iconic page. There's really no story just to go with it at all. It's just Jean and this giant pink phoenix raptor behind her cradling a son, which is like had already happened in the prior issue with the Dabari planet. So this is pretty much just Byrne straight up doing a pinup and flexing. There's no narrative reason for it to exist. And Jean's hair is like almost as big as her whole, like that's the hair I aspire to. It's as big as her entire body.
It reminded me of my cat with the ball. Like, that's the intensity she attacks a ball. Like, she will, and then so it kind of made me laugh. But I actually looked up, I'm like, whoa, that's the sun. She's about to destroy it.
It's literally about to consume another sun. Maybe this is the second sun she consumed.
Yeah. Has there ever been Phoenix versus Galactus? We need that.
Hey, and like a what if, but not.
Yeah.
No. I feel like we need that. Like, who can eat the?
Yeah, not in a direct fight, but in a hot dog eating contest. So the big plot of this issue is that Jean herself briefly maybe wrests a little bit of control from Phoenix, or at least inserts a little bit of awareness in Phoenix of how kind of off the deep end she's gone. Yeah. And Jean comes back to Earth, specifically to her family home, to try to like reconnect with this idea of humanity as she's struggling to connect at all to whether she's human at all anymore now that she has access to these Dark Phoenix powers. In a scene that I always find very creepy and unsettling, she's talking to her parents, her sister is at that home as well, and she can't stop herself from reading their thoughts. And it's not just like a psychic. It's not just a psychic being like, oh, their thoughts are so distracting, but almost this like, these humans and their thoughts, and it really gives you a sense of creepiness about how post-human she's quickly becoming before she ever gets in a fight with her friends. At least that's the way I've always read it. Freya, did you get this sense? What did you think about this visit to the Great Family Home?
No, it is. It felt like exactly what you said. Like it's like a last time, like trying to connect, because every time she's trying to kind of connect, it's just blowing up in her face. So it's just coming back one more time and then trying to connect with the family and everything, and then that blew up again. I think the whole everyone is scared of her, and then that kind of got her. I think like part of me really was hoping that we saw at least a mini side series or something where we kind of saw it from her point of view, like more in background info, like how is Jean feeling about all of this, and then like how she's trying to kind of keep the Phoenix under control and failing to do so, but then Phoenix is telling her, oh no, walk away from this humans, like no, I can't walk away from something like that would have made it more land more. But I'm just having to use my tropes and all the things that I already know in terms of storytelling. Oh, okay, that must have what happened. But also her sister is like worried that, oh, the kids are muted. I'm like,
her mom is like, are you eating enough? And Jean's thinking, if only you knew.
Yeah, I just ate 5 billion people. Oh no, I didn't eat them, but I ate the sun. So yeah, I think it's just like more like last ditch attempt. Like it failed with her friends, or like her found family, but now it's like her real family, like a last ditch attempt that, hey, maybe they can help me, and they couldn't.
Yeah. Tyler,
do you think this is her trying to connect, or her trying to sever her last ties to Earth?
You think she might be there to kill them?
No, but basically, I think is the interplay between Jean and Dark Phoenix. So basically, Dark Phoenix wanted her to come back to her family, so that she can see how far beyond she has become, and then we severed this last connection you have, because she has already severed the connection with X-Men, her found family, like Fariha mentioned earlier. So now her real family, she's like, let's kill this last connection with this Earth, with this this backward planet of yours, and let's go into space. Let's do what we were meant to do. And and then on the Jean side, she's trying to find that connection to keep her here. And I mean, in a way, it's kind of like an interplay between these two, the struggle between these two forces within this shell of Jean Grey. So
I really like that theory, and I think that is probably the truth. But the thing is that because I'm so starved for Jean showing any level of agency in any part of her life, I am going with that she's the one who brought in order to find the last connection, rather than Phoenix doing that. I mean, it's either way it works.
Yeah,
right?
it's kind of
Yeah.
like, just a fine line.
Yeah,
Depending
and
how
it-
you read it. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think like that's I think a good way of storytelling. Like, it's like two people can come look at it from different point of view, even the end result is the same.
Well, I think something that you passingly brought up, but I think it's one of my other big points about this before we move on to our tussle with the X-Men, is the Dark Phoenix saga, much like many of these classic Marvel sagas, it's quick. Like, people treat it like it's this big space story. Like, they're in space she's in space for an issue and a half and then 137. People treat it like it's this big throwdown with the Phoenix, but she only turns into the Phoenix at the beginning of 135, and the throwdown is really only in 135 and 136. People elevate these classic stories because they're classics in such a way that makes them inherently unsatisfying to modern readers, because you're not going to get what we think of as a saga. Like, this is not a saga the way that we would think about a saga as a comic reader in 2021. And I always kind of like push back on people when you see them talking to a new reader and say, well, you've got to read the Dark Phoenix saga. First of all, I mean, Free's been reading X-Men with us now for 2 years, and she's just getting to the Phoenix saga, and it's interesting and it opens up some questions, but you just don't. Like, there is no reason you have to start here. And past that, it's not even a saga, really. It's just a handful of related issues. And it's the same thing about the Kree-Skrull War and the Avengers. People go back to read it, think it's going to be this big intergalactic throwdown. It like happens within like a few scenes of an issue. It's just a bunch of stories that are happening around this Kree-Skrull conflict. And so I always kind of laugh when people with these certain classic stories are like insisting to these modern readers who are like 20 years old, 15 years old, even 30 years old, like, you've got to go back and read the XYZ saga. Like, no, you don't. Shut up.
So, and I would say though, because I'm glad you said that, because I was so unimpressed. I'm like, this is it. I was like, where's my 100 tie-ins to read and understand?
No, there's no 100 tie-ins.
There's no tie-ins, you guys.
Not only tie-ins, but it's just a small story. It's like she blows up a sun, the X-Men bring her back down to Earth, and then she has to pay for her crimes. That's it. That's the whole story. But it also kind of shows you, do you need a 10-issue event series? Like, this is a very memorable story. It has a ton of huge ideas. 137 really is one of the classics of the form. Do you need a 12-issue mini event to do something that's effective? You should be able to do something that's effective in 80 pages.
Do you need 22 chapter X of Swords?
No, I don't, So I think it cuts both ways. I think in some ways these stories, well, that's a fight to have in a different episode.
Oh my God.
Compared to this. Like,
this is so much better than X of Swords. This is a million times better than X of Swords.
No, I'm talking about the scale of it. Like,
okay.
What you're trying to achieve out of it, right? What's the end game out of it, right? Because from that point of view, okay, there was at least something, because 137 has that, we're gonna put you somewhere and you're gonna fight. But I feel like X of Swords did it a little better. But then again, it's also like, trying to keep modern reader excited versus back then when we talked about it before, like, these were not tropes yet. Right. These were brand new stories back then.
The whole like fight your equals in the show. I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but like the things that happened in 137 was not as we've seen it all before. But again, I just think it's really interesting how this cuts in both directions. On one hand, people build these sagas up so big for modern readers that they can't even stand up to it. But on the other hand, they're memorable for a reason. Like, there are individual issues in the Kree-Skrull War, like the Journey to the Center of the Vision, which I think are some of the best issues of comics from decades on either side. But that, and then you look at that issue and look at modern stuff, and you like all this hyping you do of all these events, but you can't deliver one issue as good as Journey to the Center of the Vision, or one issue as good as 137. So I think it's interesting. And that's why there still is value, I think, in reading these comics and reading them critically, but you just can't put them on too high a pedestal.
Right. Don't put anything on high pedestal.
No, screw pedestals.
Yeah.
No, I
just keep them on the ground. Keep all.
I mean, at least at this point in time, I will definitely put Hawks #2 up there.
Well, I won't.
Good. Because that changes everything.
That changes everything. That's the only thing. But I know what you mean, Peter.
So look, the other thing that really happens here, there's not much. The X-Men have been off on their own they're at the mansion, kind of stewing, brooding over what they're going to do about Jean, who, let's be fair, she's somewhere off in the rest of the universe. They don't necessarily have access to her at this time. And Beast comes up with this diadem, this psychic circlet of machinery that he's going to use to short circuit their power. And they finally confront her outside of her parents' house because they know that she's back. Nightcrawler does the same trick he did with Magneto's helmet, only in reverse. He actually puts the circlet on Jean, and in an especially creepy panel, Jean whips it off of her head while her body and her face is all in shadow. But before that can happen, we have Wolverine being the only X-Men who seems to really realize the gravity of this situation and that he's got to go in for the kill. Everybody else is kind of just playing around thinking we're going to save her. Wolverine's like, this is the universe at stake. You go for it. So I want to turn it over to our resident Wolverine stabbing women in the gut reporter on the scene, Fariha here. But before I do, the one thing I'll just add to that is it works better for me here because we've just seen him be a killer with the Hellfire Club, and like now this is that Wolverine. Like if he had done this 5 issues ago, I don't think it would have read as well as it did after the stuff that just went down at the Hellfire Club. But now I turn it over to Fariha. What do you think about Wolverine's complete willingness to kill Jean here?
So the thing is, though, I mean, I know that I always say that, oh, Wolverine does this. At least in this scenario. And then he's saying, and we talked about it before, that there was one panel over here where it's like so on point on the character. I feel like this is mostly him projecting that he wished people had done that to him when he was out of control. And that is him like kind of taking the initiative, even though, okay, like there is a plan to control, like, let's see how that goes. But he's kind of going, but I felt like this was, I don't know, like Wolverine is like one of those things, like every time you want to hate him, he tells you something, then you're like, oh damn, now I can't. And then that's his, like, that was this moment, like it was like a wish fulfillment. It's like, I wish someone did that to me, even though it's nearly impossible to do that to him. So he was like, I know that no one else will, but I will take the initiative to do this, even though he claims to love this moment.
Tyler, what did you think about Wolverine's willingness to go in for the kill here?
I mean, that's the thing for that I remembered about Wolverine in this arc is that, yeah, he's like he's willing to do whatever to do things that the other X-Men are not willing to do. So even though ultimately he did not go through with it, but at least he's like, yeah, I need to really get this under control because no one else could do it. And I think that is one of the defining characteristics of Wolverine throughout his run on X-Men, on Claremont's X-Men, is that he's willing to go far, whereas some of the characters would stop short, of certain things. He's like, nope, I know where I stand. I know where the X-Men stands, and I know where I can go that the X-Men cannot. So I think that's a big difference, and it starts here. So,
but ultimately, go ahead, Fariha.
I wish that there was actually at least a scene of this discussion and then this blowing up. This complex like discussion between them, because we have seen this again and again before, that he's going head to head with the rest of them in whatever capacity that is like, oh no, this is not how you do it and all that. I wish this is where it would have been better if there was actually something like that, because everyone was talking about like, oh, how we can save Jean, is like, and then he just either walk away with like, do you think you can save her, or something like that. That would have added more to it. That's just more me being like, if I were the editor, that's what I would have said. But
that would change the flow of the story, because this was supposed to be a surprise attack on Jean, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but I think even if Logan walked away from that conversation of like just saying like, sometimes you can't save everyone, I don't know if that would tip us all that he was going to try to kill her, but that would kind of give us that moment. Whereas really we just get that frustration of them in the danger room, which always when I get to it, I'm kind of like, really? Like that. I mean, I guess, it's kind of like if you're waiting for something nervous, if you're waiting for one of your family members to get out of surgery or something, like you have nervous energy and you kind of just do something. But the danger room scene always just comes off as like so weird to me. But it's kind of like, these are the three X-Men who aren't really in charge of things, as we've seen in the past. It's Cyclops and Storm and Beast who are actually plotting with each other at this point. Right. But ultimately, it winds up with another psychic dance battle. Professor Xavier versus the Phoenix. And in a way, it somewhat mirrors a little bit of his confrontation that we saw with the Mal Farouk back in the flashback. And we get the sense, both in the story and in the art, that the Phoenix's power, the scope of the Phoenix, dwarfs him. Like it's seen towering over him, bigger and bigger, until he's just a speck. And it says the struggle is epic, waged simultaneously on all the infinite planes of existence. And so finally, that Xavier, not so much that he wins, but he helps reconstitute one of the psychic circuit breakers, and maybe Jean too from within is helping. And that's the end. And everything seems fine. I mean, Jean is naked, so she seems okay. Scott proposes mentally, and she says, "I do." Everything seems like we have a happy ending. We just needed Professor Xavier to come in and fix everything, right, Fariha?
Yes, that's pretty much it. And then everything happened in the next position. We didn't even get to see it because we already saw his psychic dance up with Farouk, so we can't replicate that over here. Because I was like, oh, that's when I wanted like what you said, Jean helping probably from the other end. It was like, no, this is not gonna happen. I'm gonna that would have been so epic. That would have been a saga. But no, we didn't get that. We just got that some exposition and everything's okay. We got proposal. It all ended with a proposal. And her father is like, oh, here's a clothes. It's like, oh, my dad is blushing. I'm like, oh, what is all of that?
I know. Claremont has some issues, I think, is what we're discovering here in the Dark Phoenix saga.
And by the way, I had to remind myself that he's not the old man he was then when he was writing it.
He was relatively young at this point.
Yeah, that made it a little better because I was like, oh, some creepy old man writing about this. But then you're like, okay, he was a young man at that time, writing about young women.
He was really young, yeah.
So I think that's a little palatable. Jean is as old as Claremont.
What do you think, Tyler, about Professor Xavier fixing it all here?
I mean, I don't know why I don't remember how he fixed it in the saga, even though I read it so many times.
Because it's not memorable.
Yeah,
because nothing happens. Yeah,
because nothing happens, and it is part of. I think this is probably the part which I thought was a little bit weak. And Xavier comes and saves the day again is kind of the Silver Age thing that happens, right? Because it's always the fact that the original five couldn't defeat the Brotherhood of Mutants, but Xavier just roll in his wheelchair, and it's like everyone just got frozen in place, and end of story. So in the first place, why did he send the original five?
And it also kind of reaffirms his whole they're making mistakes without me. Scott needs me because he comes in and fixes it all, supposedly.
Correct. And this is him flying off after speaking to Moira. It's like, oh yeah, cosmic.
Right.
And he probably whammy warrant to fly him over in his plane.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. He definitely did that. But you gotta imagine how awesome it would have been if they were actually all planned it. This was all everyone planned it and all of it. But the thing is, it just didn't happen. And this is why we need that 12 issue tie with 100 tie-ins. Come on, we need to know where everyone came from. Now we're like,
no, they did show it, but and this is the one time that it wasn't show and tell, because you in one panel you see a shuttle flying in the background of Phoenix.
Oh.
Yeah, so they did show it. They did show it. Yeah.
There it is. Yeah, but it just happened so suddenly.
It just happens, and then
I was genuinely shocked.
Yeah.
Speaking of shocks, though, the issue ends with a shock, which is that everybody disappears.
Yeah.
It's not over.
Happened?
We think that it's over, but it's not over.
The Fate of the Phoenix.
But we have one more episode to get to for the Fate of the Phoenix. We do have, however, 2 classic X-Men stories to read here, which have nothing to do with this. But they happen to be part of probably what's happening to the side of this story right now. They're 2 Dazzler stories. By the way, I might have misspoken earlier. We do have one more classic X-Men story to read next episode, which is Classic X-Men 43. So these are our last 2 before that. So I have never read, I've paged through these 2 issues because I do have a Dazzler guide on my site. So I've paged through all of her appearances. I don't know that I've sat and read all of the text of their conversation in 37. 37, it has a scene that really appeals to me and feels like Grip from My Life, which is Dazzler playing in all these different cover bands. She has all these different shows and rehearsals, and one she's doing Aerosmith songs, and one she's doing other stuff. We come in mid-scene of her singing Ring My Bell by Anita Ward, I think is the original artist. And she skates off afterwards because it turns out that she has a late night meeting with all of her bohemian friends. Some of them are musicians, some of them are poets or whatever, but some of them come from well-to-do families like Allison does, some of them don't. But they take over this diner during the night shift where the waitress and the cook barely even speak to them. And they just have all of their debates, all of their philosophical moments of connection, and gets into some real philosophical questions of what it means to be a mutant and if she has responsibilities by being a mutant. Fariha, what did you think of this humanizing, mutinizing moment for Dazzler?
There was a lot of philosophical things, or conversations going on. I will be honest, I don't think I paid attention to a lot of those, but I think it's like the key takeaway was though is like, what's your responsibility, especially if you are if you are someone who is out there in the public spotlight and you kind of have a different identity that then what should you be doing? And yesterday I also happened to read the first time North Star came out, Alpha Flight 106 I believe, and then that was also like a lot of discussion about this father who lost his son to AIDS, and he was like, my son didn't get a funeral or like any spotlight because he's gay. So obviously, and then North Star was like, oh, I'm gay, you can't just tell me that. And he's like, oh, okay, you are, and you're not doing anything to kind of do that. So I think and then mutant being the allegory of that, but then it's just kind of gets spotted over there too. But then I also kind of like the idea that Ellison was saying that this being a hero, being a mutant is not what she's interested. She just wants to live, and sometimes that's okay too. Just because you are in a public space and or you are different, doesn't mean you have to fight the fight or you have to live that life. So I think I kind of liked it, and especially with the 2 comparison, having not necessarily planned, but having read those 2 back to back, I thought that it was very very powerful statement.
Tyler, what did you think?
If I apologize to the viewers if you see me swaying, because I was thinking, ring my bell, ring my bell.
Ring my bell.
So I was like listening to that song. I was like, wow, Fariha was talking. But I mean, I'm kind of in the same spot as Fariha because this whole meeting up with friends to talk about philosophical stuff and political stuff is kind of not something that I do when I'm in her age, like in her early 20s. So in some ways it doesn't resonate with me. But what really resonated with me is that Nishiza basically wrote a story that is what Allison is. So Allison has never wanted to be a superhero.
No.
This is not her jam. She's like, no, I don't want to be a superhero. I do not want to be an X-Men. It's the same with Havoc. So she's like, I just want to live my life. I just happen to have powers. That's all it is. This is me. And I thought this is pretty very well, in the sense that very well defined here. And also I kind of miss Rick Leonardi's art. So so this is like, something that when I revisit it, I kind of like it too. So
For me, the first thing it makes me really think of is it makes me think of the end of Act 1 of Rent. Of course, Rent came years after the story was written, even as a backup in classic X-Men. But this idea of all of this creatives coming back from their gigs at the end of the night and kind of all descending on a diner with this like great nervous creative energy that they're in the world and they have the power to change the world. That's something, as you get older, you sit around and debate philosophical stuff too, but not with the same kind of energy that these kids, because they're mostly young, have in this diner. And it makes me just think of that scene when the waiter comes in and he says all of those orders and they all go wine and beer. So that was the one thing on my mind, if any Rent fans out there. But the other thing is, I mean, it absolutely resonates for me. This reminds me of that coming down after a gig. I remember when I was doing my cover gigs with my band right before we left the States, and they'd be like 4 or 5 hour gigs. Which is crazy to think about, like being on stage and just sustaining. I can barely sit on the stool and do a podcast recording for 4 hours now, but I was on stage, like jumping up and down, playing guitar, singing. And afterwards, I sometimes wouldn't be able to go to sleep until 4, 5, 6 in the morning because I would just have so much adrenaline and so much sweat and so much everything that I like couldn't come down. So it really resonated with me from that perspective. And it also just made me think about like, you think there's easier answers, not just at that stage of your life. It has to do with your life experience. And I think you see that range of these characters around the table. Some of them have easier answers than others. A lot of times in this back and forth, and it purposely cuts across their conversation. So you don't really ever get one full conversation from them. It's hard to keep track of what they're saying. That's not the point of it. The point of it is just seeing these people who are together, who share this energy and where the conversation drifts. But even inside of that, you get the sense that there's some of them that are a little bit more of a realist, some of them that are a little bit more of a pessimist. Not all of them thinks everything is solvable and everything is fixable. But it definitely reminds me kind of the ease of the answers to these systemic problems that comes to you when you're earlier in your life experience, no matter what age you are, right? Where you're like, well, can't this just be XYZ? Or why don't people just that? Like it's never as simple, but it seems so simple because you're not burdened with all of the horrible knowledge that you have later in your life experience too. So I think it's a really special kind of story. I agree with Tyler that it says everything there is to say about Dazzler. And I also just think that it's like just a good comic. It maybe because it so comes from my life, and it kind of goes to show not all things are universal to everybody. Tyler on this side of the video is like, I've never done that. Me on this side is like, this reminds me of every weekend I gigged with my band. It just really struck a chord for me. Maybe because it's nostalgic and I don't have the band here in New Zealand. But
There are a couple of things I wanted to mention though. Like Tyler mentioned that the Dazzler also, like, I don't want to be a superhero like Havoc, but Dazzler does it with so much class, like, versus Havoc just comes off like whiny. So it's like he can learn from this. And then the second thing is that she uses the term mutie, like, to describe herself. Like, I think I don't know, something about that felt very visceral because I know a couple of LGBTQ who uses the F word to kind of describe themselves and stuff like. So there's like an internalized not necessarily the hate, but the internalized, like, confusion about that they have, like, and it just felt so real, like, you don't she just kind of throw it out there, and it just felt so. I kind of really liked that aspect of it, that it's just a very real conversation.
Well, and that exists in a spectrum, right? There's a spectrum from using the word because other people are using the word all the way through reclamation of the word. And it's interesting to think of where Allison is in her journey as a mutant at this point, that like, I don't think she's fully to the point of reclamation of the word mutie. No. She's using it in a much more pejorative sense to describe herself the way other people are describing her, is what I get from that. Tyler?
Right.
What about you?
No, I mean, I agree. This is something which I mean, in this instance, I actually did not spot it. So I mean, so basically, I agree with the take that she's not trying to reclaim it. Yeah. And for me, I really feel uncomfortable with using terms like that. Like, I mean, I don't see it, and I don't understand the reclamation part for me. So for me, a word that is derogatory, will always be derogatory. There's no such things as reclamation.
You don't feel that the word queer has been reclaimed to a degree in our lifetimes?
Maybe because I've never thought of queer as being derogatory
Ding, ding, ding.
to begin with.
Right.
So yeah, for me, the the word is derogatory, and I would never approve the use of it in any instances. Don't tell me you're reclaiming it, because that's BS.
Right.
That's a really interesting perspective. As somebody who's had the word queer graffitied on my home before, I have some opinions about that. But that will be perhaps a story for another episode or a completely different non-X-Men conversation.
But the thing is, I think it's because of the our language and our growing up. Like, because the thing is, like, when I was growing, I thought that this was the term to use. So
right, that's also kind of the drift. I mean, there's plenty of terms used for plenty of minority people that would have been perfectly acceptable in the 70s that are not now. And it's like, I have to do a lot of explaining when I read these comics to the kid, where the difference between like dated language and the difference between like, okay, that is a straight up slur that is being used. And because you don't want her to come away thinking that she can say those things. And Kitty loves saying all those words. So there's a lot to come. So we do have one more story today, which is Classic X-Men 38. It's by Ann Nocenti, so you know it's weird. and it's kind of really, really striking artwork too. I did not make note of who the artist was, but I certainly
Carl Baker.
Okay, thank you, Tyler. So Dazzler's in a parking garage with an old style elevator that has an attendant. And she finds the attendant very creepy and threatening, but she's not sure if she's right or not. She's trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. And then he turns out to be really creepy and threatening because he handcuffs her to a pole in the parking lot because he's into making movies and he likes to study fear. And she's like, well, you are messing with the wrong mutant today, sir, because she breaks herself out and puts some fear into his heart. Nocenti plays with some very strange themes about consent in her and assault and personhood in her stories. I mean, she just puts it all out there.
This was like a, experience every woman can like connect to.
Yeah.
Like, every woman. Like that whole like being in the elevator. Like,
and the person like looming.
Yeah, looming personality.
Or like creeping closer to you.
Yeah,
like,
creeping closer.
Is he or is he not?
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that we can't connect to being handcuffed because I mean you shouldn't. But that whole thing is like, okay, am I being horrible by thinking these things?
Right.
But then the thought is there. It was like picture perfect. Like it's shot for shot. Like I'll tell you, I do not get into the elevator with another man. Like I don't. I don't. And then so it connected from a lot of that point of view. And then the whole BS is like, oh no, I'm just doing something. Yeah, did you think about how the other person is gonna feel about this?
Right.
So but she got her comeuppance. So, she at least got her revenge. So that was pretty cool. Didn't realize that it was Allison until she's it doesn't look it without her makeup and everything. So so that was a little odd for me. But otherwise the story itself is like, we should bring Nocenti back. Let's bring her back and tell her some X-Lady stories.
And also I think in terms of just to build on what Peter said, the body language drawn in this by Baker is really striking. Like you can tell, like Allison is kind of like, oh, okay, this is creepy, and she's like trying to make herself smaller and like further away.
And he just almost seems like he's getting bigger and bigger behind her. Yeah, it's a really great marriage of the intent of the script and the execution of the script. I think that this could have come off way less creepy, foreboding, whatever, if somebody hadn't done as much visual play. It almost seems closer to Sienkiewicz's style, where it's very non-literal and he's playing with how big the shapes are based on the emotion in the moment, rather than being like, there is a man standing behind Allison. It's not quite as literal as that.
Right.
No, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's one of those creepy stories, and you get that weird feeling after you read, after while you're reading it. It's like,
Much better than the other one when they went to the Halloween
party.
What was that about? I don't get that at all.
Yeah. I mean, so I've never read Ann Nocenti's Daredevil, and it hadn't been collected for a long time, but now a lot of it's an Epic collection.
Yeah.
And people talk about it in such striking, like hot or cold. Some people think it's like the best Daredevil ever, even better than Miller. Some people are like, why would you reread that? It's horrible. Like, I can't believe we survived it the first time. And still not having read it, though, it's on my list to get to. Now I'm starting to understand why there was that big of a divide. Nocenti clearly is the kind of writer who like divides a room of people.
Yeah.
Oh, and then you should actually, like, if you can Google her, if you're like, yeah, this person wrote that. It's perfect. Like, I'm not, and she looks like badass, but the thing is, like,
she does.
there is a certain, like, you're like, yeah, I can see, you know.
Well, folks,
I met her at the con.
You did?
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without having read all this stuff, now would you get a classic X-Men issue for her to sign or something now?
Oh, absolutely. So the thing is, like, what happened? So if we were gonna, so I actually wanted to talk to not Shelley Bond, who's the
Berger, Karen Berger.
But Karen Berger. So I wanted to take a picture with Karen Berger, like, you know, because she was sitting next to her, and I'm like, oh, is it okay if I take a picture? And then she just like, yeah, she's making you feel old, isn't she? I wasn't sure what to think about that. So that was my, it's like, here, give me the phone. You think I'm old and I can't take pictures? I'm like, you want to be in the picture too? She's like, no, you didn't ask me. So.
And now Freya understands so much more about Ann Nocenti.
So I'm telling you, I'm like, yeah, this is like, she's the kind of person who writes.
So the first time I met her was at my very first con. And it didn't happen that long ago. It was at the end of 2015. And I met all three of them, Louise Simonson, Chris Claremont, and Ann Nocenti.
Oh.
And they had a panel and they were talking about X-Men. It was heaven for me because I'm like geeking out. I was like, holy shit. Like we're talking about so many, they talk about so many things and they drop so many tidbits and things that happens. And the whole thing with Shooter, the whole thing with the Phoenix Rebirth, they talk about that. No filters. So they were like, the three of them was just like basically talking over each other and adding and things like that. It was so fun. Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, Louise Simonson is also someone who put a person in an egg forever. Like, so do not mess with her either. Like, when I saw that she wrote she created Nanny, I'm like, yeah.
Well, it really gives you perspective. Like, here's who Claremont was working with as editors. Freya and I get into a lot about like, can this really be all classic and still worth recommending given how badly it treats some issues today? Like, can you say now this is a story that's 40 years old that like it still can hold up? And like part of why, even though there's so many problems to be found in these Claremont issues, it's like he was collaborating with people like Ann Nocenti and Louise Simonson behind the scenes. It was completely different than almost any other comic coming out at the time. And yet at the same time, you have Jean has power, so that must be orgasmic, or like, let's say that Storm was like a slave, or let's have them have their sexual agency threatened yet again. But at the same time, like at least it had something to say compared to superhero comics where the woman was just there to be the Smurfette, So you kind of gotta like weigh how much weight you want to give this classic material. I don't know, Free, is there anything you would add to that?
I think it's also because of like these women were also trying to get their not keep their job, but they're doing their job, and this is the best way they thought they could. They're like, okay, there is a certain expectation, there's a certain stereotype, we have to stick to it, and this is just a superhero comic that we need to put out there. Like a lot of the time is like, unless you have like, I'm pretty sure both of them now if you ask them, they will be like, okay, there will be a lot of things will change,
right?
Just the same way Claremont is a product of his time, so are these ladies. So I mean, yeah, we talk about it and I'm like, oh, seriously. But the thing at the same time, like, yeah, this is the best they could do.
Right, this was the
No,
best
but-
of, and to be clear, Simonson's not editing it at this point. It's Jim
Yeah.
Sauerkraut.
Right.
They were not.
But I'm just
Yeah.
saying, generalizing about the Claremont
Mhm.
run. Yeah.
Right. Like in upcoming.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's to be honest, like when you said that when it actually becomes good are the time they are the editors.
Yes.
So maybe they really did come and say like, yeah, let's not
They
have
rein him in a little bit.
yeah,
really.
let's not give women orgasm all the time. I mean, that's
No,
not
but-
wrong,
I mean, let's,
you know
but not
what I
on.
mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. To be fair, that is one of the more Claremontian thing that he does now and then. Yeah. There is this Claremontian thing that Claremont does. There is this Byrne thing that Byrne does, and is not very
Kosher.
modern.
Yeah.
By
Claremont, a
today's
woman
standards.
using her power, pretty much turns out like you remember those herbal essences commercials?
Well, I'm glad you guys have had some time talking about orgasms, but I've been giving it some thought, and I know what we should read next.
Harry, you're still not on this show.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm here now, and I've been giving it a lot of thought, and I think that we should read some Batman.
Oh.
Ugh.
Well, which Batman are we doing? Nipple suit Batman, George Clooney type of Batman, or
Well, we could have like a steamy, unrated video on our Patreon for the nipple suit Batman, but I've got something a little bit more cerebral in mind. So I think
So
you should
like
stay
Tim
tuned.
Burton,
and
cerebral?
we have-
Like what direct? You have any hints?
Oh, I'm not mopey enough for that. That's beautiful, but I like something a little bit more esoteric and trippy and a little bit pretentious. But
I
I
don't
think
like
something
this
that's
at
gonna
all.
it's gonna come together in a really nice way. Fariha's
don't
gonna
like
beat
it.
me up.
Oh no.
I guess Harry's gonna come back next week and tell us what Batman we're gonna be reading.
Yes, right.
Okay.
So stay
Yeah.
tuned.
Okay. That has been our penultimate discussion of our first season of reading through classic X-Men. We have one more episode. It's the big one. It's
Yeah.
Uncanny X-Men 137. Also, the story in Classic X-Men 43. Also, we are going to read Phoenix the Untold Story, which has the pre-Jim Shooter influence version of the Phoenix story that Claremont and Byrne were originally going to tell. We also might read some other bits and bobs, odds and ends. We also might give you a little bit of a summation of the journey that we've been through on this reading project these past several months now, but you'll have to tune in next time to find out. So on the behalf of myself, of Fariha and Tyler, thank you so much for being a part of our epic X-Men reread. We hope we're going to see you for one more episode presented by Crushing Comics. Until then, I hope you're well.
X-Men is better when it's read together.
That's right.